Okay team, welcome to another tip of the week. This time we're going to go over a very simple workflow of going from AutoCAD to Photoshop. So we're going to use this illustrated plan that I did on a previous project. Again, overall style, that's going to be kind of up to you all of how you want it to look, but this was a easy one that I put together in a relatively quick amount of time. So what I'm hoping to do today is show you the easy way of making sure that you have your AutoCAD file set up so that the Photoshop part is relatively easy. I'll also break down my layering method in here and show you how simple it was to put this together. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to start in CAD. I'm actually working in land effects, but all the commands are the same. I'm not going to go over how I drew this, but I am going to give you an idea of how I set this file up. Really, the most important thing is the more work you do in CAD, the less work you have to do in Photoshop. What do I mean by that? I made sure that areas that I know I'm going to have to fill, and here, let's say we're talking about the parking lot, that those areas are an easy on and off layer that I can turn on and off in here and essentially actually isolate them so my fill and selection tool in Photoshop is a lot quicker and easier. We'll get to that in a second. Other things I did in here. So usually my plan, I'm actually building my AutoCAD plan for eventual construction documents, not necessarily an illustrative plan. Depending on where you are in your project, if you're still in concept, you might be working more towards an illustrative plan. And this is currently set up that way. The big difference I would point out between those two types of plans is I'm not going to have any elements that are white. Everything when you go to do construction documents is going to be in black and white being the background, not any of the line work. Where I made these lines parking striping, so that's these ones too. These are actually white. They will print white. That way I don't have to go in and draw all of those in my plan in here. You can see those errors really clearly. You know, something will actually even change in here as these are not showing up. The striping is not really clear, so we'll change that thickness so that's a little bit more apparent. It's worth saying that this plan is still not perfect. Even going from CAD to Photoshop, you kind of pick things up as you go, so that'll be one thing we'll change as we talk through here. But all in all, you know, if I select this line, even though these aren't connected, you know, it's L, edge of pavement, I can isolate basically all of this. What we are not doing, and this is, you know, if you were doing a construction plan, you might actually set this up so let's turn on sidewalk hatch. So you actually do have a tonal hatch in here. I feel like the hatches are kind of a pain to get right, and if you have a ton of changes, it takes a long time to get those updated. You got to make sure everything's either closed or associated. You have little drop-offs, things like that. I think it's easier to do all of that in Photoshop. So I'm actually going to turn that one back off, but I probably have some other ones in here that are set up that way. I can just check what I have turned on and off or frozen. Let's see, that's text. Tin boundary, we don't have to worry about that. I've got all these turned off, you know, other areas that are hatched in, but we're going to do all of that in Photoshop. Other areas noted for certain parking areas, things like that, but we're not worrying about those separate areas. We're working towards the illustrative plan. So I'm going to close that. And first thing you need to make sure that you understand, and we'll come back in here, I'll essentially turn all of this off for the time being. So all we have is I'm printing at 22 by 34. If I go to my image settings, we're going to talk about this here in a second as well. This is a bit of a catch-22, and you kind of need to know what direction you're working towards. If you're going to print full size, I always set everything up at 300 DPI resolution. Again, this is set up, I've got this on a 24 by 36 sheet, that's okay. This 300 DPI, once we save this file is going to be really large. My full file size after I saved this was about 3.5 gigs, which not everybody's computer is going to be able to handle really well. I'll show you how to downsize this once we get a few things in here and you can save that, but we'll keep it full resolution for the time being. So I'm just going to hit OK. What we need to do, if you've never done this before, I'm going to actually, let's turn this off for a second. So I've just got the blank sheet. If you don't know how to set up a new sheet, we're going to cover all of this in a full Photoshop course. But you basically go in here, you set your resolution right here, change this to inches, set your width and your height, and whether it's vertical or horizontal layout, and then just hit create. But we're starting from scratch. I've got the full size sheet. Let's double check our sizing over here. I know I've got it on a thing that says 22 by 34. Oh, that's just mislabeled. It's on a 36 by 24, 24 by 36. So let's just change this name so we don't get confused. I need to actually get rid of this one first. I don't need it since this is just a demonstration. Okay, then we'll rename this 24 by 36. That's fine. So the very first thing you'll want to do after you get all of your plans set up in CAD is do your sheet setup. Again, we've got courses and some snippets on how to set up your page correctly, so you can check those if you're unsure how to do that. I'm going to hit Control P for print. All of this is how I set it up. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save. I've already got this one saved. I'm just going to save over this one right here. We're going to do this several times, so make sure you know exactly where you're putting this and the layout name. So we're calling this LSP Park 24 by 36. I'm going to hit save. We'll overwrite yes, that's great. I always get the pop-up of how it looks. Just close this, go back to Photoshop. Let's actually just delete this one since we're replacing it. No, not duplicate, delete. Okay. Okay, first thing we want to do, Control 0, that'll center your screen here. Then this is a big thing we want to always do. Instead of importing your PDF, make sure you're always placing the link. So this was the one we just made. This is important because every time we make a change, this will automatically update and we don't have to go replace or anything like that. So when you go to place, also change this to media. The difference between bounding box is that is going to read line work and pixels only, where media is going to understand that this is a 24 by 36 sheet and place the entire thing. In this case, it's probably not a big deal because we have a border, but in places where you don't have a border, you'll notice that it's not centering the entire sheet, but rather the elements that are inside of it. So always safe, just do media. Hit OK. You can see that this is nice and centered. I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. We've got our page lined up where we need it to go. Now, before we start adding things, we're going to do a little test. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to make changes in your CAD file that will then automatically show up here. So for example, let's see what we've got first on, I'm not deleting any of this. I'm just going to kind of go through and show you how I did it. So let's see, we'll skip over the water first. We'll do road. Oh, we need to turn these off. That's fine. And let's turn water off for now. Not worried about the deck. Where is the deck? Here we go. Deck. Let's turn that off. These are just hatches that were in Photoshop that work really well, so I kind of kept those as is. But let's say first thing we want to do, which is probably what I would do anyway, is we want to fill this road, right? So if I go in here and try to click, I've got a lot of intersection points, hatches, other things like that that are going to get in the way. But if I go to CAD, go back to model, do layer ISO, which mine looks like this, but you can also look for your layer ISO. It should be in this row of shortcut keys by your layers. So layer ISO, I'm going to click on that, which is defining my edge of pavement, and I hit enter. I got a couple of other things in here from an XREF, but overall, this isn't really going to impact what I'm doing. So I'm going to go back to my layout. It's only showing those. Do Control P, hit OK. Again, always saving over the previous one. Hit save. Yes, this will open again. Now we go back here. All that stuff disappeared. I've got a shadow somewhere on my building. There we go. Let's turn that off too. So it turned all of that off. Now you can see if I went to my selection, so that's W up here for Magic Wand tool. Always keep your PDF on top. That way your line weight is always on top of all of your colors. You need to select that. And then all I need to do is click in here, fills in all of that area. There's a couple of little minor spots as well. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. There we go. This one filled in all of those areas. You might find a couple of gaps, although now that I zoom in, that's also selected. And really from there, once you've got that, go down. I use a lot of these fills, so I'm going to replicate kind of what that's doing. Just going to copy this code. So you'll be making all of these yourself, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So now that this is selected in here, although I can already tell I've got a problem that is going out to the border because of this area. Actually, let's do that so you can see what I'm talking about. I selected, but I don't have the border showing up. So that selection didn't stop there. Again, this is a little bit of give and take. So Control Z, so we go back. Let's find out, make sure our border is on. Whoops, here we go. Make sure our border is on. It is. This is noted as, that's the wrong layer. Let's put that on, let's make a new layer. We'll call it L border. Actually, let's call it Z border. That way we can easily find it and make sure that it's turned on and off every time. I think it's good that I've got some mistakes in here because that helps us get it right. So I believe it was already on red. That's fine. Back to model. Let's close this. Layer ISO, edge of pavement. We'll go back to here. Make sure our Z border is on. It was on drain pipe, I believe. So let's make sure we shift it over before we change it. Drain pipe, border. There we go. And let's turn that drain pipe back off. Edge of pavement, that's what we wanted. Drain pipes off. Okay, so now we've got that area and it up to the border. Control P for print, hit OK, save over again. Yes. Close. Back here. If it doesn't automatically, oh, it did. That's just a very thin line. So let's test our selection again. Make sure we click on our PDF. W for selection. Click in here. It's all these roads. That looks really clean already. And what I would do, we'll continue to use the ones already made. But let's say this is where my layer is at. I'm going to make a, so down here in your adjustments, solid color. I'm going to paste that color I had in there before. Done. Very, very easy. And that's because we have good line weight coming in from CAD. Otherwise, we'd have to find out our edges. You know, again, we had the issue with the border, or manually draw all of this in, which is a total headache and it takes a lot of time. That took, outside of the border issue, that took less than a minute. Let's give it another try with, let's say, the paths, which are the sidewalks. So we can leave this on, go back in here, just double check that that's on there. Drain pipe, let's make sure it's on border. Okay, so you can either undo or reveal if you hadn't made any changes on isolate. I did undo and then just made sure that that border was on the layer that we needed to have it on. So this brings everything back. Again, you can unisolate. We'll do that one more time with the next one. So now I can isolate sidewalk. Whoops, I did off, isolate, sidewalk. That's going to show these. Back to here. It's all we see outside of some of this XREF information. Control P, save right back over that. Hit yes. Back to Photoshop. Now that's coming in. If it feels comfortable, you can turn that off. Go back to our PDF. W for our select. Some of these are going to be broken up. So just click in a couple of them. If we didn't have, actually, let's look. Yeah, we still have isolated parts. Sometimes you can actually select the outside area. Do Control Shift I. that will invert your selection. So let's say we did that. We're actually going to, this is all going to be filled in over here, but it still might be a bit faster. So let's see what our path was. Again, I'm going to not use these, but we're just using this as an example. New adjustment, fill. So this is what I mean. We selected this outside area and then inverted our selection. If you don't know how to do the shortcut, you can also do, it's up here in your select, inverse, Shift Control I. But that got a lot of these small little pieces. If that's easier, go back in here, select these areas, whichever is easier in your direction. Hopefully you understand masks. These are masks right here. I'm going to hit my brush tool. Brush tool's here, B for brush. Switch over to black, B, and just get rid of those. Just like that. A little bit of cleanup in here, not a big deal. Again, keeping these clean, or at least as clean as possible, saves you a lot of work, a lot of time of filling things in. Use your inverses, use your mask to turn things on and off. Big reason for using masks in here is if I make a change to any of this line, let's say all of a sudden, see if I can freehand this. Let's say this path just moved out here and reconnected in there. All I'd have to do is reselect, once I clean that up in CAD, reselect, fill this. I don't have to match the color because the color is determined by this. Then again, if you go and you talk to either your project team or maybe your supervisor and they say, oh, the sidewalk is too yellow, take all the saturation out, you can just come in here and change that. It's very easy, and that's why I like using the fills, because you can change all the colors really easily. The color's saved, so you don't have to remember what it is. Another reason for using masks, we'll look at that with the aerials. You're not deleting anything. Masks are your friend. You don't delete anything. So I'm just going to hit cancel. Let's close these two things real quick. I'm going to actually delete those, but really, I'll just click through these. So again, well, I've got a little effect on there, but that's okay. I'll talk about that here in a second. All of this was used of layer ISO on, layer ISO off, filling in, turning the next one on, filling, you know, that's what this is down here. This is the concrete deck, path, lawn. This is me actually selecting the individual or the in-between spaces. I like to change the tone of the green underneath a lot of the trees. So this was just me doing a little bit of more fancy work, but I used the same sort of lawn outline to color in through there. All of this was selecting and filling. Every single one of these was selecting and filling. This one, sand, I just used two fills because I kind of filled the whole area and then stippled out the other area. That's a bit more detail. We'll cover that in our Photoshop lessons. Decking, this was filled in with a pattern. So you can see I made a deck pattern and then put that in there. I'm not going to go over how to do deck patterns. That's more of our Photoshop course. But again, it's just filling the areas. That's really all it is. Buildings, usually I actually like to draw those in because you get this detached edge, but these were so small, I didn't really worry about it on this one. So that was all kind of the color fill area. I did a couple of little effects I'll touch on at the end, but all of this is just color fill. Very fast. I would say all in all, this probably took me less than half an hour of going back and forth between CAD and Photoshop to fill all of this in. So before we jump and talk about the aerial fills, I'm going to go back to AutoCAD. Let's go back to our model space. I'm going to click unisolate. Unisolate's not wanting to work, so I'm just going to do Control Z till we get back and I have all of my line work. Again, let's select these. Normally I'm always by layer for all of this. I just want to make these a bit thicker. Oh, I have this one on. This is kind of nice. Well, we'll just see what it does. This looks similar. Select similar. That should be pretty much all of them. I'm going to change that line weight to, let's make it 0.15. We'll see what that looks like. Back here, now I've got all that line work. Hit Control P, save over again. Again, not having to delete, re-import, but rather replace saves you a ton of time because now all of that updated. Okay, those are a little bit better looking. I like that. So let's talk about the aerials now. So I used the aerial for water. I made a couple of effects on that, but really, first thing you want to do, again, let's turn our ground off so we can see everything. As you can see, the existing aerial does not look like what the park looks like, but there's a lot of elements I can steal from this aerial and then also copy to fill in other areas. So as you can see, there's not a road over here. There's just a simple road over there. Entrance is kind of close to the same area. But I always bring in an aerial and then kind of save it down here as whole. I don't start deleting things. I don't even mask this one. But first thing I wanted to do was the water. Let's turn all of our ground off so we can see just the water. That's fine. So again, I use this selection to get to the shore edge. That also ignored these little areas over here. Easy to fill in. Then all I did from there, let's see, let's turn all these effects off. That cropped that base aerial in where I'm showing. The color was a little brown for what we wanted to show a little bit more. Yeah, we were faking it a bit, but it's down in Tampa. They don't want to think that their water is that brown all the time. So all I did was some adjustment layers. First thing I needed to do was I covered up all of these boats over here. All I did for that was I did a clone tool, which is over here. Do a clone stamp tool. Make sure I'm on my layer there. Make our circle nice and big. So all the clone stamp tool, if you haven't used that before, is you just click on any of the areas and then it fills in over top. So it's basically kind of copying one spot to another. So all I did was I made a new layer because I like to have the originals as clean as they normally are. I made a new layer on top. I also associate it directly down. The way you do that is you go between two layers and hold down Alt and click. And what that does is anything I do on this layer only shows up on the below layer. So it only show up on this aerial that I masked out to show the water only. So I covered those boats up, tweaked the color a little bit. I did that with a brightness and contrast and color balance. Again, we go into detail with that in our Photoshop course, but just add those and play with it until you kind of get it to a tone that you really like. I wasn't even overly fussy with this edge. You can go back in and really clean that up if you want. Then all I did was I added some stylized versions. So I added sort of a stipple effect. So I made a copy of all of this, which the easy way to do that is you take this, hold on Alt, pull it up. It'll duplicate all of those. And then do Control E and it merges all of those layers into one thing, and then you can kind of play with it from there. But I made that one and added an overlay cover to it. So obviously if it's normal, it kind of looked like this. But if I do overlay, again, we cover this in more detail, it plays with the layers below. So it changes with the tones, contrast. It depends on what's below and what's on top for how these look. Because obviously multiply, all of these look slightly different, but I thought the overlay looked good. Then I wanted to add sort of this area that made it look like it was getting less shallow, because it's sort of like a concrete area where you get your boats in. I believe they're called a launch area. So I added that concrete and then put another layer on top of it. So again, this is only showing up on this little square. All I've got is this little piece right here. But I added another layer of the water and then lightened it up. Or did an overlay on top of that so it looks slightly different. So I use all overlay for the water. Again, let's turn all these back on so we can see them. Then I needed to start adding in the trees. So I did the trees two different ways. One, I used the existing, let's open this group up. Again, I'm just using the aerial. So if I isolate this, you can see this is the mask that I created to show certain areas because they already had trees where those were. So I could fill in the existing trees in these areas. And all I did was I used a mask, changed the color balance and brightness so it matched the surrounding area, because otherwise it kind of looked a little brown and muted, and I wanted it to kind of pop. So I did it for those areas. And then I sort of cheated a bit. So let's turn this off. I kind of shifted that up a little bit into the corner to steal some of these up here, and I wanted them to look different. But then I could pepper those in up here. Again, using the tree massing that's already there to fill in areas, even though in reality we're going to be clear cutting through these areas for the roads. So that was for the massing area. We got all that turned on again. Right. Then I went through where I couldn't, because the aerial either already had a road here, or the trees didn't look right, or we wanted the trees to have a very specific sort of individual look, but also mixed. I then brought in individual trees. These can either be, I actually should have done these as linked, or a placed tree. That way, if I ever make a change to it, all of them automatically update, but I just place these individually. So these are all individual trees that I could resize, move, and change the tones to. And that was important because I wanted this to look like there were similar trees, but also varied. Then I just added a drop shadow to the group rather than each tree. That way, if I need to change the overall angle of anything, even though I'm using global light, they all change. As you can see, they all shifted. So I'm hitting cancel. So then I just went in and added trees. And again, that's just kind of selecting one, maybe using my W tool, clicking on this one. Oh, these ones are linked. Holding down Alt and dragging. And then if I needed to change the size, I'd change the size. So tree massing, a lot of individual trees. Add a brightness, color contrast to the entire group so everything kind of moved together. I think I got a couple of, oh, still on my individual trees. There we go. So let's minimize that. Then I was pretty close. This area is in the project, or right on the edge of the project scope, but I wanted to show it a little bit more saturated than the rest of it and key in this little piece that an existing building's on. So again, I just added another layer showing the aerial and then just masked that area out. So really, if I select it, you'll see I'm just using this area, but I wanted it on top of all of the trees, on top of everything else. So that's that part. Finishing touches. So really, I only did drop shadows. I did a little edge glow, which if I go to road, inner glow, if I double click on that, all I did was add a little lightness to the edge. I wanted, sometimes you either do inside having a lighter so it looks like it's sloping down, but I kind of like the edge looking a little lighter. You just go into your effects, which are down here. You click on this, you add an effect this way. We go into more detail of that in the course that we're putting together. But all I did was I put in an edge, adjusted it until, you know, that's too much. I even thought that was too much. I think I had it on like 36. But I just sort of adjusted that until it looked about right to me, just so I had a little bit of additional gradient on the road. Other than that, it didn't really add any other effects other than drop shadows and playing with color contrast and a little bit of color balance. Overall, a larger thing I like to do with a lot of my drawings is I'll add this layer of grain. Now again, when we're zoomed in this close, it feels like a lot, but as a whole, it sort of adds a little bit of a almost drawn texture to it that I really like. So the way to do that is you actually you fill in your entire screen. Well, let's just go ahead and do it. So I filled everything 50% gray. So all I did, let's make a new one. Actually, no, we want color fill. Solid color. That's all I did. Made it 50%. You can change the balance right here to 50. That's it. That's all I did. Let's change that back onto linear light. What did I have it at? I had it at linear light. So fill 50%. Make sure this is selected. Go to your filter, noise, add noise, and then you just adjust the size visually from here. Like, this is way too much. You know, this is 177%. I think I was down more at like 3 or something. You know, you play with whatever that level you want. Add noise, what am I at? 12 and a half for this size sheet is what I'm at. So once you add that noise, you get this nice little grain texture on top of everything. And I think it adds texture, but it also sort of brings the image together because you are piecing a lot of things together. So it makes it look a bit more as one piece. Outside of that, I added a little border. All I did for that was lasso selected outside of my border. Again, color fill white. You can see that border's right here. And then if I control select the mask, you can see that's the area that is filled in. Very easy. Then again, everything's just on top, or the PDF's always on top, so I can see all the line weight. Once you get to the finish, if you go, oh, you know what, actually, I think these lines need to be a bit darker or a bit bigger as well, you just go back into your, here, we can even do that. Go back in here. Select all this stuff, select similar. Let's change it. Let's make it like almost 3 times as big. Go to our layout, print, done, save. Oh, I've got this open. Hit yes. Go back in here. Those pop just a touch bit more, just a tiny bit. That's all I was really looking for. So again, give this method a try, this fill, and then trying to use a lot of aerials and piecing things together. It moves very quickly. We do a bit more of this in the course that we will be putting together in more detail, but this is sort of a quick shortcut on how to go from CAD to Photoshop. Big takeaways: make sure you are placing linked. Make sure you're using really good layer management in here, and the rest of your Photoshop work should go pretty fast. One other thing I wanted to bring up is sometimes I'll get backgrounds from these sites, Pixabay and Pexels. You can find, like, you just type aerial. I'll go in here and I'll mask out, I'll take this chunk of trees. All of this is free license, so you can grab these for aerials. These 2 sites are really good for that. Last thing to mention before I let you all go is the downsizing. So again, if you're really struggling, your computer's really struggling with this full size type of image, you can go in here, image size, keep it the same height and width. Just drop this down to 72. If you're only showing on your screen, all screens really show at like 72 anyway. When you place anything like an InDesign. So 72 is actually pretty fine to show on a screen. Hit OK. That might take a while to sort of convert. And then once it does, the only thing you might need to change is go back into that noise. And we basically reduce by like a quarter. So I'll just drop this down to maybe 3. Looks pretty good. And now you have a much lighter file. I think when I checked the difference between the file size between the 300 and the 72, it was like 200 meg versus, yeah, almost 3.5 gigs. So if your computer or your memory is really struggling with the larger size, just drop down your resolution. There's no harm in it. You could still print. I mean, if I zoom in, you can start to see the pixelation, but this is well zoomed in, so it's not really that big of a deal. Well, thank you for joining for this week's quick tip. And again, please check out our courses, join our Discord group, all of that good stuff, and we'll keep the videos coming to help you all out.